Hello and good afternoon. Salam Lisabedani, I'm Brendan Paul and you're watching World Today. US President Donald Trump announced yesterday that the United States would introduce a baseline tariff of 10% on all countries and higher duties on some countries, including Malaysia, at 24%. The reciprocal tariffs, Trump said, were a response to duties and other non-tariff barriers put on US goods. U.S. stock futures dropped sharply after the announcement following weeks of volatile trading as investors speculated about how the incoming tariffs might affect the global economy, inflation and corporate earnings. U.S. stocks have erased nearly $5 trillion of value since February. Chinese imports will be hit with a 34% tariff on top of the 20% he previously imposed, bringing the total new levy to 54%. Close U.S. allies were not spared, including the European Union, which faces a 20% tariff, and Japan, which is targeted for a 24% rate. The sweeping duties would erect new barriers around the world's largest consumer economy, reversing decades of trade liberalization that have shaped the global order. Canada and Mexico, the two largest U.S. trading partners, already face 25% tariffs on many goods, will not face additional levies from Wednesday's announcement.
I call this kind reciprocal. This is not full reciprocal. This is kind reciprocal. But what we do is we cut it in half. We charge them. My answer is very simple. If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America.
Trump previously imposed 25% duties on steel and aluminium and extended them to nearly $150 billion worth of downstream products. Tariff concerns have already slowed manufacturing activities across the globe, while also spurring sales of autos and other imported products as consumers rush to make purchases before prices rise. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada will fight U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs with countermeasures.
As of this evening, the tariffs on automobiles will enter into force, and the U.S. has signaled that there will be additional tariffs in so-called strategic sectors, pharmaceuticals, lumber, and semiconductors. So we're in a situation where there is going to be an impact on the U.S. economy, which will build with time. In our judgment, it will be negative on the U.S. economy. That will have an impact on us. But the series of measures will directly affect millions of Canadians. We are going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers, and we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7.
Meanwhile, European leaders took to social media to voice disappointment on the 10% baseline tariff on all imports to the US and higher duties on dozens of other countries announced by Trump. Michael Martin, the Irish Taoiseach, expressed his disappointment, writing on X that the decision by the US to impose 20% tariffs on imports from across the European Union as deeply regrettable.
Tariffs benefit no one. They're bad for the world economy. They hurt people. They hurt businesses. And so I regret deeply the decision of the US administration this evening to levy a tariff of 20% on all goods imported from the European Union. My priority and that of the government is to protect Irish jobs and the Irish economy. And we will work with our companies, multinational companies and Irish companies, to navigate the period ahead. We will work with our European Union colleagues in getting on a negotiation pathway with the US to limit the damage of these tariffs.
Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said in a record statement that he is deeply regrettable with the path the US has embarked upon, seeking to limit trade with higher tariffs.
Ömsesidiga samarbetet genom fri handel har bidragit till fred, teknologiska framsteg och minskad fattigdom globalt. Ja, hela mänskligheten har fått det bättre. Det är fritt företagande och fri konkurrens som har lagt grunden för västerlandets framgångar. Det är därför amerikaner kan lyssna på musik i svenska Spotify och vi svenskar kan lyssna på samma musik i amerikanska iPhones. Därför beklagar jag djupt att USA nu har slagit in på en väg där man vill begränsa handeln genom höjda tullar. Vi vill inte ha växande handelshinder. Vi vill inte ha något handelskrig. Det skulle göra våra befolkningar fattigare och världen på sikt farligare.
The sweeping duties would erect new barriers around the world's largest consumer economy, reversing decades of trade liberalization that have shaped the global order. Bursa Malaysia's benchmark index was 0.52% lower in early trade in tandem with regional market as US President Donald Trump announced tariffs of at least 10% on all countries effective 5th April and individualized reciprocal higher tariff on certain countries effective 9 April. All other countries will continue to be subject to the original 10% tariff baseline. ASEAN countries will be among the hardest hit, with Malaysia to face a 24% reciprocal tariff versus Cambodia's 49%. At 9:03 a.m. today, the FTSE Bursa Malaysia FBM KLCI fell 7.95 points to 1,518.57 from Wednesday's close of 1,526.52. The benchmark index had opened 9.22 points easier at 1,517.30. Decliners trounced gainers 301 to 71, while 180 counters were unchanged, 1,795 untraded and 8 suspended. Turnover stood at 133.05 million shares, worth 59.27 million ringgit. SPI Asset Management Managing Partner Stephen Innes said global equities were buckling and Asian markets could face the worst of the tariff fallout. And in other news, British Airways is partnering with Malaysia Airlines to expand its codeshare agreement, offering travellers more travel options to Europe. British Airways' Regional General Manager for the Middle East, Africa and Asia, Helen O'Connor, said the expanded network will provide more choice and flexibility for customers to explore new holiday destinations. The first British Airways flight BA33 arrived at KLIA at 5:20 p.m. on Wednesday, marking the resumption of daily services between London's Heathrow Airport and KLIA. Commenting on the development, O'Connor emphasised the route will be operated by the airline's Boeing 787-9 fleet with a full cabin configuration. She also underlined several key areas in the airline's GBP7 billion investment to enhance and expand its business. Additionally, British Airways had invested £100 million in upgrading its information technology systems to offer passengers a brand new website and mobile application, which will be launched this year. Currently, British Airways operate to over 200 destinations in more than 70 countries. Meanwhile, Transport Minister Anthony Loke announced Malaysia is working towards expanding its flights connectivity to Europe. He said that the government is looking into attracting more European airlines to set up direct flights to Malaysia, as well as encouraging local carriers to have routes established.
Connectivity, of course, is important for the country in terms of trade, in terms of businesses, and especially for tourism. Because for tourism, if you do not have direct flights, that will not be attractive for the tourists to come to our country. So we need a lot of direct flights from different countries so that it can expand our tourism sector.
He made these remarks in a press conference after welcoming the first British Airways BA flight, which has resumed daily service between Kuala Lumpur and London. Commenting on the development, Loke said that the return of the United Kingdom-based airline reaffirms Malaysia's status as a key aviation hub in the region. Loke added that beyond tourism, the route also opens up greater opportunities for enhancing trade and investment between Malaysia and the UK. As the weekend deadline for TikTok to find a buyer approaches, Amazon is throwing its hat into the ring for the video social media site. TikTok faces 5th April deadline to reach a deal to find a non-Chinese buyer under threats of being banned from the United States. US officials have raised security concerns over the app's ties to China, which TikTok and owner ByteDance have denied. Trump administration officials are meeting on Wednesday to discuss the various options for TikTok. A US administration official on Wednesday confirmed Amazon had sent a letter to Vice President J.D. Vance and Department of Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. However, Amazon declined to comment, while TikTok and ByteDance did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Amazon has long harbored ambitions for an in-house social media network that could help it sell more goods and appeal to a younger audience. Trump said last month his administration was in touch with 4 different groups about the sale of the platform without identifying them. Private equity firm Blackstone opens new tab in discussing joining ByteDance's non-Chinese shareholders, led by Susquehanna International Group and General Atlantic, in contributing fresh capital to bid for TikTok's US business.
Ancaman keganasan sentiasa wujud, termasuk pengganas individu yang bertindak secara sendirian atau dikenali sebagai lone wolf. Individu ini mungkin kelihatan biasa, tetapi mereka boleh menjadi ancaman besar kepada keselamatan awam jika didapati bersalah. Anda boleh disabitkan kesalahan dengan hukuman penjara maksimum 30 tahun dan denda. Bersama, kita memelihara keamanan negara.
Next, Malaysia's rescue team recovers 6 bodies and 1 survivor in Myanmar. But first, the Israeli army struck a United Nations clinic in Jabalia refugee camp on Wednesday, killing 19 people. 9 of them were children. Civil Defense spokesman Mahmoud Basal said there were also dozens of people wounded in the strike. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, said in a statement that the strike hit 2 rooms on the first floor of an UNRWA-destroyed health center, which had been used as a shelter for 160 displaced families. It added that UNRWA staff were managing the shelter when it was hit today at 10 a.m. local time, and highlighted that the agency had shared the building's coordinates with Israeli army. The IDF accused the Palestinian group of exploiting the civilian population as a human shield and used the site to plan their attacks. The Ramallah-based Palestinian Foreign Ministry condemned the massacre at the UNRWA clinic in Jabalia, calling for serious international pressure to halt Israel's widening offensive. Israel has on several occasions conducted strikes on UNRWA buildings housing displaced people in Gaza, where fighting has raged for the past 18 months. A strike on the United Nations-run Al-Jani school in central Gaza on 11 September drew international outcry after UNRWA said 6 of its staff were among the 18 people reported killed. U.S. defense officials have ordered additional forces to the West Asia, including the Carl Vinson carrier strike group and aircraft, as the U.S. continued its strikes against Iran-backed Houthi and as tensions with Tehran rose over its nuclear program. The Carl Vinson was expected to arrive in the region after completing exercises in the Indo-Pacific. The carrier will join the Harry S. Truman as U.S. forces hammer Yemen's Houthi with near-daily airstrikes. Pentagon said in a statement it was also prolonging the Harry S. Truman carrier strike group's deployment in the region. The unusual 2-carrier presence would repeat a show of force by the Biden administration last year. The deployment comes as the U.S. carries out strikes against Iran-backed Houthi in Yemen, which Trump said have decimated the group. Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said Monday that any attack by the U.S. or Israel would be met with a, quote, a firm retaliatory strike after President Donald Trump threatened to bomb Iran unless it signed a deal renouncing nuclear weapons. Yemen's Houthi group said on Wednesday that overnight airstrikes on Hodeidah province killed 4 people in an attack they blamed on the United States. Houthi media had reported U.S. strikes on areas controlled by the Iran-backed group, including water infrastructure in Hodeidah, and 3 strikes in the northwestern region of Hajjah. The United States has not confirmed it carried out these strikes. However, U.S. President Donald Trump has vowed that attacks on Yemen's Houthis would continue until they are no longer a threat to shipping. Early Wednesday, Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sari announced the group targeted U.S. aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman for the 3rd time in 24 hours. His statement came just as Washington said it was increasing the number of aircraft carriers deployed in the West Asia to 2, keeping the Truman and sending another from the Indo-Pacific. Houthi-held parts of Yemen have witnessed nearly daily attacks blamed on the United States since Washington launched a campaign against the rebels on 15 March to force them to stop threatening vessels in key maritime routes. Since then, the Houthis have also claimed attacks targeting U.S. military ships and Israel. Over in Haiti, thousands of Haitians took to the streets in Port-au-Prince on Wednesday as residents expressed anger against armed gangs that control nearly all the capital and have expanded to surrounding areas and the government's failure to hold them off. Violent armed groups united behind a coalition known as VIV Ansam have forced over 1 million people from their homes, freezing the economy, fueling mass hunger and demanding payments from the population. The transitional government, a rotating body of presidential council members appointed nearly a year ago, alongside a long-manned and under-equipped UN-backed security mission, have done little to hold off the gang's advances. Residents filled the streets of Port-au-Prince carrying banners and palm fronds, while some carried machetes and firearms. The protests began peacefully, but gunfire erupted later in the day, causing a panic that caused crowds to flee. Many critics alleged the government's poor performance in face of the gang's advances is tied to state corruption and even collusion with the armed men and their financial backers. The government rejects these accusations, but Haitian authorities have a long history of ingrained corruption, and its judicial system has been paralyzed amid the violence. And in other news, the Special Malaysia Disaster Assistance and Rescue Team, SMART, has recovered 6 bodies and found 1 survivor from the rubble caused by the earthquake in Myanmar's Sagaing region since Monday. In a statement, the National Disaster Management Agency, NADMA, reported that the deceased victims, aged between 8 and 56, included 3 males and 3 females. The statement further said that all 50 SMART officers and personnel are in good health with sufficient food, water and welfare support despite 1 team member sustaining minor injuries. Earlier, Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, who is also National Disaster Management Committee Chairman, confirmed that SMART had successfully rescued a survivor who had been trapped beneath the rubble for 72 hours. The survivor is a 40-year-old man. Today marks the 5th day of SMART's deployment for its humanitarian mission and search and rescue SAR efforts in Myanmar. No other foreign teams are currently operating in Sagaing, although reports indicate that an Indonesian SAR team may be deployed soon. On Sunday, 2 Royal Malaysian Air Force A400M aircraft carrying SMART personnel landed at Naypyidaw International Airport. The team then travelled 270 kilometres overland to Sagaing to begin their SAR operations. State-run MRTV said on Wednesday Myanmar's ruling military has announced a temporary ceasefire in operations against armed opponents from 2nd until 22nd April following last week's deadly earthquake. In its nightly news bulletin, MRTV announced the ceasefire was to facilitate rehabilitation of the country after the disaster.
ငရင်တန်ကြောင့်ထိခိုက်ခံစားနေရသောတနိုင်ငံလုံးရှိပြည်သူလူထုအားစာနာထောက်ထားနားလည်သောအဖြစ်၎င်းကုညီကယ်ဆယ်ရေးနှင့်ပြည်내ထူထောင်ရေးလုပ်ငန်းများကိုအရှိန်အဟုန်ဖြင့်ဆောင်ရွက်နိုင်စေရန်ရည်ရွယ်လျက်၎င်းတည်ငြိမ်အေးချမ်းမှုကိုရှေ့ရှုလျက်တမတော်နေဖြင့်2025ခုနှစ်ဧပြီလ2ရက်နေ့မှ22ရက်နေ့အထိကာလကိုယာယီပြစ်ခတ်တိုက်ခိုက်မှုရပ်စဲရေးကာလအဖြစ်ထုတ်ပြန်လိုက်သည်
The military ruling Myanmar has announced a 3-week ceasefire against opposition groups following a devastating earthquake that claimed nearly 2,900 lives. Previously, the junta rejected a ceasefire proposal from the opposition groups aimed at allowing rescue operations to take place. The military has struggled to run Myanmar since its return to power in a 2021 coup that unseated the elected civilian government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. The military takeover has seen the economy and basic services, including healthcare, reduced to tatters amid an outbreak of civil war. And in sports, Liverpool restored their 12-point lead at the top of the English Premier League. Stay tuned.
Membakar semangat juang dua pasukan. Pemburuan tahta terulung bakal dimuktamadkan dengan pertembungan dua gergasi. Harimau Selatan kini bersedia merempuh pertahanan kebal skuad Tok Gajah. Nantikan penentuannya dalam siaran langsung perlawanan akhir Piala Malaysia 2024-2025 Sabtu 26 April Johor Darul Takzim bertemu Sri Pahang FC 8 malam di saluran OK dan saluran Sukan RTM, juga penstreaman langsung di RTM Click.
Welcome back. And in sports, the English Premier League, Liverpool restored their 12-point lead at the top of the Premier League after Diogo Jota strike won a feisty Merseyside derby 1-0 over Everton on Wednesday. With just 8 games left, Liverpool sit 12 points clear of second-place Arsenal, who beat Fulham 2-1 on Tuesday. Everton captain James Tarkowski escaped with just a yellow card from an early wild challenge on Alexis McAllister to set the tone. The visitors hit the post through Beto in the first half, but saw their 9-game unbeaten league run come to an end when Jota fired home just before the hour mark. Victory means Liverpool need just 13 points from their remaining 8 games to be assured of a record equaling 20th English top-flight title. And the slot side had lost their previous 2 games in the League Cup final against Newcastle and the Champions League last 16 against Paris Saint-Germain, but they got back on track in their match towards a record equaling 20th English title and first since 2020 in Slot's maiden season in charge. Jack Grealish ended his long wait for a Premier League goal as a Manchester City side missing Erling Haaland beat struggling Leicester 2-0 on Wednesday to go fourth in the table. England international Grealish struck in just the second minute his first Premier League goal in 16 months, with Omar Mamouche also on target in the first half at the Etihad Stadium. Victory took the reigning English champions back into the Champions League places, although they are still a huge 22 points behind runaway leaders Liverpool. It also saw them cope just fine without Norway striker Haaland, who will be out of action for up to 7 weeks after suffering an ankle injury in Sunday's FA Cup quarter-final win at Bournemouth. City are up to 4th place, 1 point ahead of 5th place Newcastle and 2 in front of 6th place Chelsea, who face Tottenham in their game in hand on Thursday. Barcelona will face rivals Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey final after Ferran Torres secured them a 1-0 win at Atletico Madrid on Wednesday, progressing 5-4 on aggregate from the semi-final tie. Record 31-time winners Barca had the better of the clash at the Metropolitano Stadium after the wild 4-4 first-leg draw, and defeat leaves Diego Simeone's Atletico with little to play for in the rest of the season. Following an 8-goal thriller in the first leg of the semi-final in Barcelona, Ferran Torres' efforts from inside the box in the 27th minute. It was enough to earn the Catalan side a win in the Spanish capital that booked their ticket to the final in Sevilla later this month. Torres was freed through the middle by Lamine Yamal and took the ball in his stride before striking a low shot into the bottom left corner past keeper Juan Musso. Atletico pushed for the equalizer in the second half, but Barca held on to secure a narrow win. In a rather unpleasant news for Barcelona, La Liga lowered the club wage cap cap on Wednesday after it said the club's recently revised accounts do not match the end-of-year figures from its previous auditor, which included a 100 million euros transaction. The previous accounts included proceeds from the sale of VIP seats in the renovated Camp Nou, which allowed Barca to comply with La Liga's financial fair play rules and extend the registration of players Dani Olmo and Pau Victor. La Liga said in a statement it will file a complaint against Barcelona's previous auditors who approved the club's accounts as the new auditors, the third Barca have had in 3 months, disagreed with the criteria used to include the transaction. According to La Liga, the new auditors, Crow Spain, concluded that the 100 million euros should not be fully accounted for in this season's finances because the asset, new VIP seats, does not yet exist and cannot be considered as income for the club. It added that based on its accounts, Barcelona do not have the capacity to register Olmo and Victor. Real Madrid coach Carlo Ancelotti appeared in court on Wednesday for the first day of a trial in which he is accused of failing to pay 1 million euros in tax on revenue from image rights during his first spell at the club. Italian Ancelotti is the latest of several soccer celebrities to be investigated by the Spanish tax authorities for alleged tax fraud. Many cases, including those of leading players such as Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo and Spain's Diego Costa, have been settled out of court with large fines. In 2023, however, the Supreme Court upheld the acquittal of Bayer Leverkusen coach Xabi Alonso after he refused to settle and defended his innocence. The prosecutor is seeking a prison term of 4 years and 9 months and a fine of 3.2 million euros for 2 counts of tax evasion in 2014 and 2015. It argues that Ancelotti had only reported the salary he was paid by Real Madrid and had admitted income from his image rights in his tax returns. Ancelotti told reporters last week he had complete trust in the Spanish justice system and that he was looking forward to testifying in court. Before the hearing, the prosecutor said Spain's tax authority had seized the debt plus interest from Ancelotti. The trial is scheduled to take place in a Madrid court over 3 days. The parties could reach an out-of-court agreement before the hearing starts or at any point in the process. That wraps up World Today this afternoon. In our top story, US President Donald Trump announces 10% baseline tariff on all countries. Do join us again tonight, 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM, or you can also stream us on RTM Click's website and mobile application. Till then, I'm Brendan Lepol. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you for watching. Take care.